Welcome to M Talk, brought to you by the M Scale, where we talk all things menstruation. We interview the best and brightest working across multiple fields, all with the same mission, to make the lives of people who menstruate a little bit easier. Hi, I'm Annabelle, your host. I am the founder of the M Scale and the host of M Talk. Thank you so much for being here. I am so excited to be presenting all the amazing work that people are doing in the field of menstruation. I think we can all agree it's an incredibly interesting topic because for those who have periods, they impact almost every aspect of our life. So, without further ado, let's get into it. Today, we are talking to Dr. Sohere Roked all about hormone health and the menstrual cycle. Dr. Roked has worked across the UK in NHS hospitals from A&E to surgery and also psychiatry, often on the forefront of modern medicine, including achieving a postdoctoral certificate titled Psychedelics, Mind and Medicine. And she has her own practice which focuses on holistic hormonal health. Her philosophy on health is multifaceted, approaching her patients with a mixture of hormone health, somatic wisdom, nervous system regulation, and healing tools to help them reclaim their vitality. She also wrote the book The Tiredness Cure and has some fantastic free resources on her website, which I highly recommend and we will link in the episode notes. But today, she is kindly taking the time to tell our audience all about the biology of the menstrual cycle and how lifestyle adjustments can help us navigate our response from menarche to menopause. Welcome, Sohere.
Hi, thanks for having me.
That's all right. Thank you so much for coming on because you're a fountain of wisdom when it comes to all things hormones. And I'm so appreciative that you're here to sort of tell our audience share a bit of your knowledge. But I wanted to give you the opportunity to, at first, discuss a bit more about why your practice is a bit different and how you sort of came to find this holistic approach that you do have.
Sure, yeah. So, I went to medical school with a vague sense, I guess, of wanting to help people, but not really knowing what that meant for me. And I really enjoyed all the different jobs I did and the specialities I saw in my training, but nothing really felt like a permanent fit, I guess. And then I did some work in psychiatry once I was qualified, and I really enjoyed looking at that mind-body connection. And actually, I worked on the Isle of Wight for a while, and where I worked, it was really holistic. Like their psychiatric inpatients had acupuncture and yoga classes and nutrition classes and cooking classes. And I just thought that was how everything was, like in all trusts, across the UK. And then when I left the Isle of Wight, I kind of realized that wasn't the case. But I guess that was me seeing very early on in my career that, combining holistic things and lifestyle changes with, medicine and conventional treatment can really work well. But yeah, as I did more psychiatry, I kind of saw it as a bit more like medication orientated. So I thought about maybe becoming a GP and then again, working in communities, seeing families. And again, that's not quite as how I imagined it. So then I read a book about integrative medicine, which is very much looking at exactly what I described, the best of conventional medicine combined with ancient wisdom or, alternatives, lifestyle, more holistic things. And then I heard about the importance of hormones, actually. And that was from a coach I was working with who was like, I've just been to this amazing place where they look at your hormones and really personalize things and advise you on lifestyle and supplements. And I'm like, oh gosh, I started thinking about all the patients I'd seen over time. And I thought, oh, wow, I bet there was a hormonal element there to that pain or that tiredness or, the skin rashes or just whatever was going on. And it really just gave me a new way of looking at things. And I guess in a way I haven't looked back. And that was probably about 13 years ago or so. So that's kind of been my practice working, obviously with that interest in psychiatry. I'm really into the mind and body connection. Really love working with hormones just because I find it quite satisfying because I see the impact it has on people. And then I guess just the other aspect of that is, I guess more recently I've been bringing in more work around the nervous system. We could call it, spiritual health, emotional health, looking at trauma and things, because trauma impacts stress. Cortisol, the stress hormone, impacts all your hormones. So yeah, just really working from that place now a bit more as well.
I feel like your knowledge in this topic is so advanced to the sort of general knowledge in the population, because it feels like you started this looking at this 13 years ago, and now it feels like people are starting to understand their hormones a bit better. I hope that women are starting to understand the menstrual cycle hormones a bit better. I do live in a bit of a bubble because I have a menstrual business. So everyone's talking about it all the time. But now you're sort of even going further in the sort of holistic approach and talking about trauma responses, nervous system, which I'm going to give us a chance to talk about more about down the line, because I think it's super important and super interesting. But I think just for the sake of our listeners who maybe haven't started this understanding of hormone journey, especially around their own cycle, I wanted to ask you if you could sort of do a 5-minute crash course on hormones and the menstrual cycle. So what's happening during a standard menstrual cycle, we'll call it.
Sure, yeah, of course. So yeah, I think there still isn't always a great understanding about what's going on with periods and hormones and things. So I think it's definitely a great place to start for sure. So basically, if you're a woman and you have ovaries, they produce different amounts of hormones throughout a month, or maybe more around 28, 30-day cycle, the menstrual cycle. So let's start when you're on your period. So that is classed as the beginning of the cycle. So if someone asks you where you are in your period, day 1 is the first day you bleed, and then you would count on however many days from there to where you are now. But at the beginning of your cycle, your hormones are low. As in, mainly when I say hormones, I mean estrogen and progesterone. I will come on to testosterone in a bit, but they're the two main ones I'm going to focus on now. So you're bleeding. Your uterine lining, so the lining of your womb, is shedding because you are not pregnant. So you're shedding this lining, and that's what the bleed is. It's not actually a bleed, it's a shedding of menstrual tissue. So that's something not everybody knows either. So yeah, so the hormone levels are on the lower end. Now, after that time, which could be somewhere between, it could be 2 days, 3 days, it could be up to a week, maybe a bit longer. But after that first week of the cycle, the estrogen then starts rising, and it will rise until it's high enough to trigger ovulation. Ovulation is where the ovary releases an egg, an ovum, down the fallopian tube, and it goes into the womb. Now, ovulation is when you're at your peak fertility, if that's something you're thinking about. And if it's not something you're thinking about, it's still good to know, because around ovulation, for some women, because they have that peak in estrogen, it can often be where they feel their best. So they can have their best energy, their best mood, maybe feel a little bit more frisky because, the body's trying to get you pregnant. So you might feel a little bit more in the mood. And that's generally because of the high estrogen. So I guess it's good to know when you ovulate, and not everybody knows that. Of course, you can track it on an app. Sometimes your temperature goes up very slightly around ovulation. Sometimes you can feel like, you might just feel like, oh, I'm ovulating because I feel good, my skin looks nice. I feel really well in myself. I've got more energy, a bit more va-va-voom, And also you can often have a different vaginal discharge. So it's called an egg white discharge. I would say uncooked egg white. So a bit more of a mucousy discharge. And that can be a sign of ovulation. And some women actually get a pain in their side when they ovulate. From the side of the ovary. Yeah, me too. Yeah.
And it's more painful than period cramps, which seems very unfair.
Yeah. So that's all the different ways you can track ovulation. And now after ovulation, when the egg is released into the womb, there is a part of the egg called the corpus luteum, and that helps you make progesterone. And you need that progesterone to thicken the lining of the womb so that if you are trying to get pregnant, the fertilized egg can implant. But progesterone isn't just for your fertility. It is quite a sort of strong, steady hormone, I would call it, So a bit of progesterone can help you feel a bit calmer, a bit more regulated after all the fun and excitement of ovulation where the estrogen was high. It's good for your mood. It's also good for your sleep, hair, skin, can make you feel a bit glowy and things. So That's progesterone. Can help with bloating and fluid retention. And like in my work, it's the balance between the estrogen and progesterone that I find quite important. So especially in that what we call luteal phase. So, around the third week of your cycle, day sort of 19 to day 22 or day 21 is often the quoted time to look for that balance of hormones. That's a lot to do with the work I do with my patients. But then if you're not pregnant, your progesterone and your estrogen both start to drop off. And that's when people can get their premenstrual symptoms, PMS, mood, feeling a bit lower, feeling a bit more fragile. And, to a degree, that's normal, right? Because we've just said you're not pregnant, the hormones are dropping off. But I think it's when it's really impacting your quality of life. That's when it might be a problem. And that's sometimes when people come to see me because it's impacting their quality of their life too much. And just very briefly to touch on testosterone. So testosterone genuinely is reasonably steady throughout the month, but it does often peak at ovulation. So like I said, you can feel a bit more in the mood to get pregnant potentially, but it's only a small increase really. It's pretty generally steady. So that if I'm testing it, can be done at any time really. So yeah, it's a lot of information.
It is. I think on the episode notes, we're going to put a little diagram on this as well so that people can sort of have a look, because you've got these sort of two main agents playing with each other the whole way, and where you are on your cycle is going to impact so much of your life. Maybe I guess every person responds to hormones differently.
Yeah, definitely. And, it is a lot easier to track now with all the apps available and things like that, which then also give you a bit of feedback on how you're feeling and things. But, just go old school if you don't want to get an app, right? Write it down, put it in the notes in your phone. But I always say to my patients, I think it's really important to keep a track of this, because then you're going to know if something's changed. Like say with, if your ovulation becomes earlier or later, if you're tracking it, then you're going to be like, it's normally day 14, it's suddenly become day 10 or later. So I just think it's really important for us as women to get in tune with our bodies. And if we can be more in tune with these sort of hormonal, biological changes going on, we're going to understand ourselves better. I remember calling my friend up one night and going on and on about things. And she goes, you sure you're not due your period? And I'm like, no, I'm not. And then the next day I'm like, oh, I got my period. She goes, yeah, I thought you were sounding like, maybe a bit irrational about the situation. So yeah, and like sometimes before my period, if something's playing on my mind, I just say over and over again in my mind, this isn't you, this is your hormones, this isn't you, this is your hormones. And I reevaluate the situation a couple of days later before I make a rash decision that I'm going to regret.
I have to say, I have a son who is under 2, and not only has always been super helpful understanding my own hormones for my menstrual cycle when I wanted to get pregnant, because I was very aware of when was the right time to do it and to sort of monitor and make sure I was having a healthy cycle and go to the gynecologist beforehand and everything. So it was really helpful for me. But it was equally very helpful following the hormone track of a pregnancy throughout the 40 weeks, because sometimes there'd be like week 28, I want to murder my husband. Like, what is happening? And then I'd have a look at like the general sort of, oh, wow, yeah, no, that's gone up a lot. So I'm actually just responding to the hormones. I'm not getting a divorce. Like, it's okay. Yeah. It definitely helps with sort of the more negative side effects, we could call them, or the harder side effects to hormones. I know you do a lot of work on the holistic side of things and the nervous system. And I wanted to ask you, we sort of have this general idea of, once again, we are talking about a sort of regular cycle with these hormones. We'll get into sort of irregularities later on in the conversation. But with you looking at holistically, what are some of the things in a lifestyle that can really impact different stages of the menstrual, or your response to these hormones, I guess?
Yeah, so, there's so much we can do within our control as well, like looking at, things like nutrition and, movement or exercise, how we're managing our stress, our habits, sleep patterns, gut health also. All these things really impact hormones. So I think it's important to find out about these things when I see someone, like, what is your sleep like? Do you have regular sleep? Are you staying up really late on your phone or your device? What's alcohol intake like? How stressful is your job? I asked someone yesterday, have you always been an anxious person, or do you think it's like more of a thing now with your new job and stuff? And they're like, no, since I've been a kid. And I'm like, okay, that gives me an idea then of, how you are, how your body operates. You're used to be on high overdrive maybe, and then that could be pushing up your cortisol, the stress hormone, one of the stress hormones. And then the cortisol is very inflammatory to the body. So that can have a negative impact on your female hormones, on your thyroid hormones, on, lots of other aspects as well, like, weight and mood and things. But yeah, we're particularly focusing in on the hormones there. So there's no point me just really saying, oh, take more and more hormones if the issue is a cortisol issue, or an issue is that someone's drinking too much alcohol or eating too much sugar, or they're in a unhappy relationship, or they hate their job, right? These things are really important. And it's like there isn't going to be a patch or a pill that can necessarily take away all those things, but also understanding the interplay between these things in lifestyle, the way we feel, and the effect it has on our hormones.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is just from me from the past month. I just had a brutal period. And I was like, wow, it was Christmas. Did eat a lot of crap, did drink a bit more alcohol than I normally do, didn't sleep as much as I should have. Like there's a lot of the Christmas holiday stress. There's all of these things happening this month. And it gave me a really brutal response to sort of that drop in hormones. It was a rough one. So that was, I think this is also, I was more noticing it more in myself because I knew that we were going to have this conversation. And so I was like, I also downloaded your resource about reclaiming your vitality. Which is really fantastic. But it is a harsh reset. And I was reading it. So for our audience, Dr. Roked has this incredible resource about reclaiming your vitality, and it's about starting from scratch. So like cutting out all these sort of lifestyle factors that could really be impacting you, taking them all away, seeing how you feel, and then beginning your journey from there. And they're all very sensible. You read them and you're like, well, yes, this makes a lot of sense. But so I was reading that going, well, this is what I should be doing. And then I was looking at the past month over Christmas and New Year being like, I definitely didn't do that. So
yeah. Yeah, and there's a difference between knowing and doing, right? We can all be guilty of that, myself included. And also it is about time. I often say, like, if I feel like I'm seeing someone who's quite stressed and cortisol's an issue, like the last thing I want to do is give someone who's stressed more things to do to like make them more stressed, right? Create the vicious cycle. So I think it's about meeting someone where they're at, and that's not necessarily like mollycoddling them, but just going, right, what can we manage right now at this moment? And then hopefully as someone feels better, they're seeing improvements, they can do a little bit more, they want to invest a bit more time and energy into like, doing things to regulate their hormones and stuff. But yeah, I also think it's not overly helpful to be hard on yourself, right? It was Christmas and like, it's like, okay, that's been and gone. Now we're in January. Let's see how the next couple of months go. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was also like I already suffered from this, so that's fine. I'm getting the pendulum swinging the other way, and that's all right now. I know that you mentioned this, and I think it would be really interesting to start talking about this. How you're starting to sort of tie in nervous system practices and trauma, and how trauma can kind of link to hormone health. And I would love to hear more about this.
Yeah. So, I mean, when we were just touching on the cortisol, cortisol is a stress hormone that's much easier to measure than adrenaline and noradrenaline. And if one has a high cortisol, then that could have a huge impact on your hormones. And quite often one has a low cortisol. So if you have high cortisol, you can feel quite like agitated, wound up, like, a lot of thoughts, worried, fast heartbeat. If you have a low cortisol, it's a bit more like, flatlining. So you feel very tired and low and sluggish. And quite often it can look like the burnout sort of picture, because maybe the cortisol's been high for some time. Now it's gone really low because it's just been on overdrive for too long. And if there's been, things like childhood trauma or any major trauma at a certain age, it could be that right now in this moment, there's nothing to be stressed about, right? There's nothing going on. but your body, it's almost been trained to always be on high alert and high overdrive and looking for a problem because maybe something happened in the past or something in your childhood, or could even be your genetics, and you're slightly more wired to have a high cortisol, and maybe that could lead to more anxiety. Maybe you don't process stress as well as other people process stress. And then these things have an impact on your hormones. So, I mean, I just really found with my work that, from my interest in psychiatry and obviously working somewhere that was a bit more holistic, I saw quite early on in my career that there are ways to help manage cortisol and a dysregulated nervous system. And, things like NLP and, CBT and tapping therapy, which has become really fashionable recently, I've seen. And it's good, though. It's all good. And then obviously nowadays we have these devices that you can wear, that you can monitor, your stress and heart rate variability and things like that. So I think it's great that we have these things that we can be. It's not just like, oh, I'm stressed. You can actually measure how this stress is impacting your system and how it could be impacting your hormones and the way you feel. But I think it's also about giving people tools as well. So tools to regulate their nervous system, maybe 10 minutes of tapping, maybe listening to guided visualization. I always look at no extra time, net time, I always call it. And it's just looking at when you're doing something where you can do something else anyway. So like, if you're in London and you're commuting on the tube or the train, you could either watch the news or do your work emails, both valid, or you could maybe, read a book that's relaxing or do 10 minutes of breathing with your headphones on and really trying to just carve out small amounts of time in the day without, trying to consume you, where you can do things to sort of help regulate your nervous system.
Yeah, like you mentioned, not adding to your stress of now I've got a list of 1,000 things to do to try and alleviate my stress, but finding pockets of time.
It's going to make things worse. Yeah.
To recalibrate. I've got a smartwatch. It's not an Apple Watch or anything fancy, but I bought my husband a smartwatch for his birthday and an Apple Watch, and I thought I might try out one of these. I'll just get like a cheapo one, and it's some Chinese company manufacturer, but it's amazing. It's got like breathing exercises on it. It's got like monitoring stress. It's got like taking pause moments, and it's got like little reminders where it's like, hey, you seem to be getting a bit like agitated, or like your heart rate's going up quite a bit, but I don't think you're exercising. Do you want to take a pause? It's really fantastic. So I will say, if you're going to do this, go back to episode 2 and listen to all of our information about protecting your data and privacy if you're using any sort of apps like this. I'm just going to say that to our audience right now because that's important as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have a lot of resources these days, which is great, but it's almost like we have too much choice and it's overwhelming, and often patients say to me, oh, I want to take a supplement, but there's so many supplements, I don't know what to take. So it's almost like we then get into a paralysis of not knowing what to do because there's so many different options out there, and you might look on social media and everyone's doing more than you anyway, so you feel like you're behind. But I would just say, just start somewhere, and it's for you, it's not for anyone else. So if you want to do some guided breathing, do that. If you're like, I think I'd prefer just to take a walk outside, and that's my way of managing my stress and my cortisol being out, getting morning sunshine, doing 5 or 10 minutes of tapping, doing something like, alternate nostril breathing, that's a really good cortisol regulator. Just do something, even if it's for 5 minutes. And I think it's all these little things do sort of accumulate and make a difference.
Absolutely. We're going to take a little break on that point to take you through some updates in women's health. Stay tuned as we continue the interview after this break. I wanted to take a moment to discuss a really important project that has just been released over in Canada. Our friends at Hello Period Equity have made a series of American Sign Language videos on the topic of menstrual education. It's fantastic. I've already learned the sign for menstruation and so much more. They're available on YouTube and there are over 50 short clips. Holly from Hello Period Equity is going to be joining us in a later episode to talk all things menstruation, ability and accessibility. But for now, we implore you to please check it out and we'll be linking the clips in the episode notes. And in tech health news, a UK startup called M has raised $9 million in seed funding to bring to market what it calls the world's first smart menstrual cup. Unlike traditional menstrual products, the Smart Cup is made of medical-grade silicone embedded with ultra-thin sensors. It pairs with a connected app that allows flow volume, cycle regularity, and other menstrual health metrics, potentially giving user-objective, data-driven insight into menstrual cycles. The company plans to launch the device in the UK in early 2026, with broader global availability to follow. Supporters say that this could mark a major shift, transforming menstruation from a largely private, under-monitored process into something measurable and comparable to other vital health indicators. If you are interested, we have an episode coming out later in the series all about technology and the latest developments in femtech, and we release an episode about data privacy when it comes to period apps, so you might want to check that one out too. I want to take it back a little bit back to the menstrual hormones again, because I want to take this moment to ask you, I mean, we talked about sort of like a regular menstrual cycle and the hormones that can impact you there. But obviously at the beginning, at the end of sort of this stage of a woman's life, it can be quite disruptive, right? So from menarche to menopause, as I said. So do you think we could take a bit of time to maybe first for our parents who are out there who potentially have some daughters or children about to enter puberty? I don't think you probably get many patients who are in adolescence, but could you share a little bit more about what you can expect to see in terms of the menstrual cycle when it comes to menarche, which is the beginning of your period, essentially?
Sure, yeah. And I think, it's always good to reflect, if you're a parent, maybe how the start of your period was potentially. And, it's difficult, it's embarrassing. Like there's so much around, like, your class at school, like who's got their period, who hasn't, am I behind, am I early? Oh, just please let me be in the middle, right? You kind of feel. So there's all these factors involved where it's just a big change, and to maybe it'll be nice and easy and that's great, but to also know it can be quite normal at the beginning for it to be irregular. Like your child might get their period 1 month and then maybe not get it for a month or two, and that can be completely normal as well. And yeah, I guess if your child doesn't want to talk to you about it, to maybe share online resources with them and things. But yeah, it's just, I think if you look back on your time with it and remember how it felt and, all the weird emotions it brought up, I think that will help. But of course, sometimes the period doesn't fully regulate itself. It might still be very delayed or close together or very heavy, or there might be other symptoms going on around it, like, acne potentially, or changes in the skin and weight and things. And I would say that, give it a little bit of time, a few months, for things to settle. And if it isn't, then it could be a good idea to, seek some help from your doctor. I think that nowadays, most doctors aren't going to be quick to like just put people on the pill, maybe like they were when I was growing up. Most girls with any sort of menstrual irregularity got offered the pill. But I think it could still be good to speak to the doctor. They can always do a referral if they think that that's a good idea, and if it's really impacting your child's quality of life as well.
Yeah, when I was 13, I had the onset of my period and it would last for about 12 days of bleeding and spotting. And then, so it just felt like I was constantly bleeding, essentially.
Yeah.
And I went to the doctor, I think, but I only lasted about 4 months. And then I went to the doctor and immediately got put on the pill, which I do I don't regret. I don't think it's done me too much damage. I went off it 10 years later, which is still quite shocking. But I do wish potentially there was a lot more knowledge in this area, and maybe some other things that I could look at that could potentially help. Like you're saying, lifestyle, was it that I was living off a diet of 2-minute noodles, which I was at 13? Could that have been sort of upsetting everything? What are sort of some other sort of treatment ideas that are out there, if other than the contraceptive pill for teenagers?
Yeah, I mean, like you said just now, I think really looking at things quite holistically with, nutrition, are you having enough protein? Are you having enough healthy fats? Because all the hormones are made from good cholesterol. And, I guess trying to have that balance with those things. Are there any sort of nutritional deficiencies that might require, some vitamin supplements or something like that. So that could be worth having checked perhaps with the doctor or just getting checked yourself. There's all those things going to help support the hormone production. So it's like with B vitamins, you need B vitamins for lots of different reasons, mood, energy, but you also need B vitamins for hormone production and also metabolizing your hormones well and your stress hormones well. So there's something called methylation, which is essentially when you have B vitamins like B12 and folate, and your body has to add a methyl group onto them. So I'm like, it almost like conjugates them into a form that the body can absorb. So if you can't methylate well, i.e. add the methyl group genetically onto the B vitamins, it doesn't matter if you're eating loads of good food with B vitamins or taking B supplements that are not methylated, you're kind of on the back foot, and that's a genetic thing. So yeah, like, it could be that there's a deficiency there in methylation or something that's impacting your hormones. That's something I look at with my patients, and it wouldn't well, it might be surprising for you to know, but I don't methylate, but it's not surprising for me to know I don't methylate because I was having heavy and painful periods from a very early age. I started my period at 11. I was the first girl in my class to get their period, which isn't great when you're that age. You don't want to be first in that. I've always had a bit of estrogen dominance, and that can lead to some weight gain and stuff like that. I've always been quite a high cortisol person because I don't methylate well, so can't metabolize cortisol as well, which means like if something happens, it's like the shock stays in my body longer than I think it should for a normal person. So yeah, there's like loads of things like that going on. So when I found out I didn't methylate, it was like a relief almost to know that, I wasn't just crazy. It's like a hormonal and genetic thing. So yeah, I think that there are lots of things that you can do and look at to understand yourself better. And it's certainly helped me be less hard on myself, I guess, to understand these things.
Yeah, I bet A&E must have been quite hard then if you sort of have this sort of, if you're running on high cortisol already and then you're working an accident and emergency, that would be quite stressful, I imagine.
Oh no, I wouldn't say so. No, I really
No?
enjoyed it. Yeah, I really enjoyed
Okay.
it. Like if you're used to working on high adrenaline, then you're used to it already, right?
Yeah,
So
true,
yeah.
yeah.
So
Uh,
yeah, that's not really an
Surprisingly
issue.
peaceful.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, not an issue.
I think from here, if we were to say, after everything you said of talking to sort of parents with children about to enter puberty or going through it, I guess I would say to people who menstruate, who are raising children, understand yourself really well, and that will help you to understand and help your child navigate this, essentially.
Yeah, for sure.
Probably the first step. And then I know you do a lot of specialization through your practice towards the end of this sort of period of life, which is perimenopause into menopause. What can we expect during this time? Is there sort of a golden standard, or is it all a mess?
Yeah, unfortunately, there's no golden standard, but I wouldn't go as far as to say it's all a mess either. Maybe somewhere in between. And I think understanding your body is going to put you in really good stead for your perimenopause, because then you're going to know if your cycle is longer or shorter, or if you're bleeding heavier or lighter, or actually, I normally feel a little bit tired or low 2 days before my period, but it's suddenly become a week or like, longer. It's really good for you to understand, because then and exactly what you're saying earlier as well, Annabelle, oh, well, I think it's explainable this month because it was Christmas and maybe I overindulged a bit more and I wasn't in my normal routine. So, always look at things from the lens of the context of your life, I say. It's not,
Yeah.
the two things that intertwined, like, your menstrual health and your overall well-being and what's been going on. But yeah, the symptoms are really variable in perimenopause. So it could be anything from more PMS or longer PMS to maybe feeling a bit foggier, a bit more tired, a bit more achy, skin changes, maybe bloating and things. But like the good thing is, like before, maybe even only like 5 years ago, or maybe it was a bit longer, a lot of GPs would say they couldn't treat women until they were in menopause and their period stopped. But quite often the perimenopause can be a slightly more challenging time. Whereas now GPs are willing to treat perimenopausal women with hormones, which is great news. And it's great that there's been more advances in the care for women overall, because it is a hard time. I would often say to some of my patients, we see, say you're in your late 40s, early 50s, in many ways that should be a time where you're thriving. People are doing better in their career, getting to the top of their game and where they want to be. Maybe the kids are slightly older and a bit less hard work. And then along comes menopause and perimenopause to throw you off your game.
Just to humble
So
you, ever humble you.
yeah. Just another thing women have to be humbled by. So yeah, I just feel like I'm an advocate for women getting good care around their menstrual needs, whether that's periods or, fertility support or managing fibroids or PCOS or perimenopause or menopause, because I think that, us women, we have so much knowledge and value to give to people. And that's really hard to do if you're running on empty a lot because your menstrual cycle and your hormones driving you crazy. So I just think it's a really important thing to look at.
Yeah, 100% agree with you. We've talked about it a little bit. You've kind of mentioned a lot of your answers, sort of these sort of symptoms that you would see as not a cause for concern, but maybe it's time to go and get a check or to seek some help. What are some symptoms that you think should be checked in a menstrual cycle?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's not like, oh no, you're having this. It's about how it's affecting your quality of life. That's what I say. So you might think, oh, well, it's not that bad, or if it's affecting your quality of life, if it's impacting your ability to work and to parent and to do the things you want to do, I would say if you're able to, go get it checked, because like we were just saying about, women's quality of life, I think often women accept a slightly lower quality of life than perhaps our male counterparts would if they were in a similar situation, because we're so used to putting other people's needs before our own. So I would say that, quite often people, well, it's not that bad. It's not that bad. But I'm like, but it is that bad. You said you're not sleeping anymore. You're not enjoying things like you did. Your focus has gone at work. You feel foggy. Yeah, okay. There could be worse things happening, of course, in terms of health, but it's impacting your quality of life, and that's important. So that's normally when people come to see me.
I like the word that you use across your practice, which is like a vitality. I like that, because I think that if someone's they're suffering through their cycle and just sort of getting through it, that's not really embracing the vitality in life, is it? You're not feeling like you have vitality. You're just trucking on, essentially, which is quite a female thing to do as well, like, oh, just going to truck on. We're just going to get through this. I just got to get through this, and attributing it to other things as well. Oh, it's just, it's just that stressful season. Oh, it's just this deadline. It's just these things. And I think everyone's guilty of doing this so often. Also in mental health, where they go, I'm just feeling a bit low because of this. It's just this, and then it will go away. And then you realize it's been 2 years and there's always been a reason, and it hasn't gone away after that reason. It's just you found a new reason to attribute it to. So I like that sort of reframing it, being like, well, where is the vitality in your life? Like, you should have that. I love it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I just think that it's often a case, oh, we're getting older, I'm just getting older, but you still want to be thriving in your midlife, right? So I think that that's important.
Yeah, there's also a long way to go. Like, it's not like you're winding down for the season. Like, there's a lot of life after this as well. So I want to ask you about supplements, because you've touched upon it a little bit, and it feels like every man and his dog is selling a supplement at the moment. I mean, I think there's a really unregulated wellness industry out there, which is truly terrifying sometimes. And I think that people get really scared about supplements. Either they take them all, or they don't want anything to do with them, or they don't think they work, or some people call it expensive pee, right? Like there's a lot of conversation around it. So I wanted to sort of ask you about how people can navigate the world of supplements.
Yeah, sure. So, like with anything, there is a variation in quality of things, right? There can be better quality supplements than others. So sometimes when I see patients, might have the conversation around supplements. So they're a bit like, oh, not everyone, but sometimes people are like, I don't think I need supplements. And I'm like, okay, great. Tell me what your diet is like. What do you eat on a daily basis? How many fruit and veg are you eating a day? And really, if it's anything under 5, you probably have some sort of nutritional deficiency. And of course, in the UK, we have the 5 a day for fruit and veg, 3 veg, 2 fruit. But in some other countries, it's 10 a day. So, 5 a day is the bare minimum that we should be getting to be getting our health needs met, really. And then it isn't just about that. It's about the quality of our food as well. So, there's soil depletion in terms of, the richness of our soil that then goes into our food. Our food often travels quite far and it can be artificially ripened, like the fruit and veg, as in not under the sun. That's going to affect the quality of the nutrients in what we're eating as well. So it's not just about how many fruit and veg you're eating, it's about the quality of it as well. So these are all things to think about. And then the other thing is, like, if there is a deficiency, you probably want to correct that. Well, of course, we could test for the deficiency first to make sure, but you probably want to get that corrected, So, we live in the UK in the winter and basically, and, there's not a lot of vitamin D going on here right now. So yeah, like supplementing with vitamin D over the winter. And vitamin D is actually a hormone, even though it's called vitamin D, not called hormone D, it's called vitamin D. So that's something that's really important. Obviously, I mentioned the B vitamins for myself and the methylation, but B vitamins are really important for your hormone metabolism and cortisol. So often a good B complex could be useful. And then I would say, like, it kind of depends on what's going on for you. So a friend was around mine like a couple of months ago and he's looking at all the different supplements I have. And he's like, what should I take? And I'm like, well, I don't know. You need to tell me what's going on with you. And he was saying, oh, it's going into winter. I'm getting some joint inflammation and pain in my hands. And I'm like, right, curcumin, which is the active ingredient of turmeric, very good anti-inflammatory. That's what you should take. So I think, if you're doing targeted supplements according to what you're feeling, like if it's for your mood or your sleep or your joints, then I think that can be quite useful. But I understand it's quite overwhelming for people with like so many different brands all the time advertising.
Yeah, and like you said, different qualities. I think
Yeah.
that, it's very unregulated, this sort of wellness side where you have people who don't really have any experience, any professional experience, any studied experience, sort of wheeling and dealing supplements left, right, and center to improve this or do this. That leads me to my next question, because all of this, like everything you've sort of spoken about, is incredible. And if a woman could walk into their GP and get this sort of service, that would be amazing. But you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I do not believe there is the time or the energy or the resources, especially within the NHS, to sort of offer this sort of incredible holistic in-depth review of your general health. And I wanted to ask you, like, what would you hope for the future? I know that you're on the forefront of a lot of interesting things, but even what you're talking about now it's like you said, you've been doing it for 13 years. I don't know if it's still like made its way into general practice that much. What would you hope for the future for the woman of Britain, for the woman of the UK?
Yeah, so first of all, I will just say that, say you need to go see your doctor for some hormones, maybe this conversation's inspired you in some way or other things you've heard. First of all, you've got to be your own advocate. So I would say to go in prepared. Like we were talking about monitoring your cycle, why you're monitoring your cycle, what's changed, go in with the information, create your case towards it. Testing of hormones isn't always available on the NHS, but there are loads of other companies where you can get hormone tests done that can be cost effective. So to look into that if that's within your resources. But yeah, to go in to your GP with information rather than I don't know what's happening. And then you might not always get the answer you want and you might feel demoralized and things. So really become your own advocate, really understand your own data. I think that's very important. What I would like to see in the future is just more and more information around women and hormones. And it does seem to be like varying results depending on who you see or where you go. So more, training in hormones and looking at things in a holistic way. And, I've seen loads of changes within NHS practice in like the last 15 years, but yeah, we still have a bit of a way to go. But I do think there are a lot of pressure on NHS and the NHS doctors as well.
Mm.
And again, I do think that having that information about yourself and also having some self-responsibility and looking at things you can do, trying a few things first, looking at more holistic things also, never put off going to see the doctor if you're worried about something. That's not what I'm saying. But, you do some things for yourself and you seek medical help, right? Because it is getting harder for some people to access services. So that sort of responsibility around health, I think, is important. But what I'd really like to see going forward is us as women coming together more in community and supporting each other. Because back in the day, when people lived in tribes, essentially you would have, the women coming together with the elders, the wise women who were valued, who could advise the younger women, and women helping each other with the childcare and the chores and all those sorts of things. And I think that we have lost a bit of our sort of community sense. And I think that we can all learn from each other. So instead of seeing each other as competition, we come together in community and we learn from each other. We learn from our elders. And I think that a lot of that information is getting lost. And I think that would also really help us manage our menstrual health, childcare, child rearing, advice, if we all work together as a community. So I think that would be a really beautiful thing to see more of.
I did this amazing course to prepare for birth, and it was it was like an online course by this midwife, a doula, her name's Poppy something. She's incredible. And she did this whole course, and it wasn't about like pushing for a non-medicated birth or not. It was just preparing for a birth, essentially. Whatever birth you're going to have, you prepare for it. But one thing she said was like, we don't see birth anymore. We don't bear witness to birth. Therefore, we only see dramatized versions of it where it's terrifying and there's screaming and there's blood and there's like, and it's so traumatizing or it's so terrifying, so that we're going into birth with this preconceived idea that it's going to be horrendous. And I have given birth and it isn't amazing, I will say that. But when I sort of did her sort of mindfulness and like did a lot of hypnotism, like meditation and everything before, and then while I was in labor, I had this sort of oxytocin bubble track on and I was doing a lot of meditation. It really helped me not be scared of what was happening. Which is lucky because he turned around and it was a nightmare. But yeah, this whole concept of we're not in these female communities where we bear witness to what happens to our bodies. It's kind of all kept hush and private is a true theme in what we're talking about whenever we talk about menstruation, essentially, because everyone we talk to, when we talk about reducing stigma, increasing knowledge, increasing access to things like products, reducing period poverty, the first step is like removing the stigma and making people talk about it and feel comfortable talking about it. And so that if you are the first girl to get your period in your class, it isn't this horrendous thing, like it's just a normal part and everyone's on board and you're not embarrassed and it's fine.
Yeah. I mean, look, there used to be rituals and rites of passage around this stuff, right? When you got your period, there could be a ritual or a rite of passage around it, and celebrating the girls who get their period that year in the community and things, instead of it being a thing of shame and guilt and embarrassment. It's almost like that's a way of like claiming our sort of feminine essence at that stage of our life. So yeah, I'm really into that sort of stuff and looking at how, because I think that's also an important part of health. And after women have children, often they, there can be groups you can go to and all that sort of stuff. But a lot of women feel really alone and they don't know what's normal if they haven't had a child before, in terms of how they feel, what they should be doing with their baby. And I think also bringing people together around that could be really healing for a lot of women.
Oh, well, I hope maybe in the future there's going to be a Dr. Sohere Roked community project or something, potentially. I am going to end it on that note because I really like that beautiful vision for the future. I like to hope that we're creating a community around periods essentially.
Yeah.
So I want to thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. You've really given us what I would think is a 360 picture. There's probably so much more we could talk about, but I know that our audience are much better off after listening to this episode. So thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me.
No worries, and have a lovely rest of your day.
You too.
Thank you so much to Dr. Roked for her time. I definitely learned a lot about hormones. I thought I knew everything. It turns out I definitely do not. If you'd like to learn more about hormone health or Dr. Roked's practice, we'll have all the relevant links in the episode note and on our website, themscout.com. As always, please share, comment, like, download our app, take a look at our website, read our resources. It's all really helpful. And tune in next episode where we are talking to Mary Burke from the Gender Hormone Clinic all about hormone therapies and what to expect. Until then, ciao.